The next case was the RUSHA case. It was a second SS case in which the defendants were charged and convicted for implementing many features of the Nazi racial program, including the kidnapping of racially valuable children from occupied countries for Germanization, the forced Germanization of other foreign nationals who were considered ethnic Germans, the forcible evacuation of foreign nationals from their homes in favor of Germans or ethnic Germans, and the persecution and extermination of the Jews throughout Germany and German-occupied Europe. In a nutshell, Russia and other organizations put in effect the pernicious Nazi racial myth, which involved weakening and eventually destroying other nations while at the same time strengthening Germany territorially and biologically at the expense of other nations. The hostages case, which is the final case I'll discuss, the prosecution was headed up by Ted Fenstermacher, who's here today, and involves some important legal principles. The hostage case involved generals indicted for war crimes committed in Yugoslavia, Albania, and Greece. The issues involved in this case were whether partisans or guerrillas were entitled to the rights of belligerents and were to be treated as prisoners of war when captured, and whether it is ever lawful for an occupying power to execute hostages taken from civilian populations. In this case, although finding most of the defendants guilty, the tribunal upheld the right of an occupying power under certain circumstances to shoot hostages and denied partisans the status of belligerents. The cases had its effects. For example, the American Army Field Manual now provides that hostages may not be taken, and for the protection of the civilian population and prisoners of war, it accords a legal status to members of a resistance movement and to partisans. Moreover, in 1949, the Geneva Convention was amended by adding a provision to prevent the taking of hostages. Important advances in international law. In sum, the decisions in the Milch and other cases which I've described made an important contribution to the development of international law by implementing the principles of the IMT judgment in other cases involving related and varying factual situations, and they remain an important inheritance of Nuremberg. Hats off to Telford Taylor for his leadership role in the subsequent proceedings at Nuremberg. I just want to say, I have 2 minutes more.
You have.
Okay, the legacy of Nuremberg.
Take your time.
Okay. The legacy of Nuremberg. Nuremberg represented the most impressive moral advance emanating from World War II. First, Nuremberg held that individuals responsible for violation of international law, and correspondingly that individuals had international human rights not dependent on nation-state recognition. This was a great leap forward in the evolution of a civilized world. Second, and closely related, it marked the real start of the international human rights movement because of the first international adjudication of human rights. Its effect in this respect is felt today throughout the world in the UN's Universal Bill of Rights, the American Convention on Human Rights, and above all, the European Convention on Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms, which is a direct legacy of Nuremberg. Third, the UN tribunal currently sitting at The Hague will be trying individuals such as Tadish for crimes which are directly parallel to those with which Nuremberg dealt. In fact, the crimes against humanity and war crimes on which the Hague Tribunal is focusing are a direct inheritance of Nuremberg. But here we need to remodel the Hague Tribunal into a permanent structure which will cover aggression as well as start afresh and start afresh and establish an international tribunal of universal jurisdiction which would deal with Nuremberg-type crimes. If some surrender of national sovereignty is involved to make it work, so be it. We have already waited too long to institutionalize Nuremberg. Fourth, Nuremberg principles covering the conduct of war incorporated into all the field manuals of the major powers, and the Nuremberg principles have been supplemented as needed by the 1949 Geneva Convention covering the treatment of prisoners of war and the protection of civilians in wartime. Fifth, Nuremberg was the first post-mortem analysis of a dictatorship. Through Nuremberg, we learned the intimate details of the levers of power in a functioning dictatorship. Hopefully, we can avoid dictatorships in the future and thereby most aggressive wars, because in my view, democracy and aggressive war are antithetical in nature. For the future, we need to institutionalize the principles of Nuremberg. We need to build institutions which will enforce them. Institutions which will outlast individual human lives, which will be there for future generations to live under. Nuremberg was right and just. Let it be a beacon light for the world to see and revere now and for eternity, to ensure a better future for all of us. As Edwin Dickinson, that great international, has said some years ago, history teaches that without ideals there can be no progress, only change. The stars that guide you may never touch with your hands, but following them, you will reach your destiny. Let us all here today tithe a bit for future humanity and endeavor to create for future generations a more secure world in which the rule of law prevails and a lasting peace is institutionalized. For me, Nuremberg remains a vivid memory which will live with me always. It gave my life a sense of meaning and purpose, and I became an individual. I resolved never to let horrors like those of Nazi Germany happen again. And I have devoted my life to that quest. Thank you.